She was America's princess, until America watched her walk into a bank with a rifle. Now let me take you back, because this story did not hit America like ordinary news. It hit like a thunderclap. The name Hearst already meant power, wealth, influence, newspapers, legacy. Patty Hearst was the granddaughter of William Randolph Hearst, and in the 1970s, that name carried the kind of weight people thought could shield you from anything. She looked like the last young woman in America who could ever be swallowed by chaos. And then chaos came through her front door. In 1974, Patty Hearst was just 19 years old, living in Berkeley, California, when armed members of a radical group called the Symbionese Liberation Army stormed into her apartment and kidnapped her. Just like that. Not in some dark alley. Not in some secret foreign operation. Right here in America. A young heiress ripped out of her life and thrown into a nightmare, and the country froze, because this was not happening in calm times. America was already shaken. Vietnam had torn the country apart. Watergate had wrecked trust. Protests were everywhere. Radical politics were in the air. People were scared, suspicious, angry, divided. Then this story exploded. And suddenly it felt like the whole nation was watching one life become a battleground. At first, Patty Hearst was seen exactly as the public expected to see her, a victim. A kidnapped girl, a frightened daughter, a desperate family, a national manhunt, the FBI searching, cameras everywhere, the kind of story that held the whole country in suspense. Then the tapes started coming out. Patty's voice. And America heard something it did not expect. She was not pleading for rescue. She was not speaking like the Patty Hearst people thought they knew. She sounded angry, defiant, political. She condemned her family. She spoke in the language of her captors. She said she had taken a new name, Tania. And that is when the story turned from horrifying to unbelievable. Because now people were asking what happened to her. Was she brainwashed? Was she being forced? Was she trying to survive? Had she been broken down? Had she joined them? Was she still a hostage? Or was she becoming something else? Then came the image that changed everything. Patty Hearst in a bank robbery, caught on surveillance, holding a rifle, standing with the very people who had kidnapped her. That image hit America like a bomb. And from that moment on, the country split. One side said she was a victim trying to stay alive under terror, coercion, and fear. The other side said, a victim or not, she picked up a gun and crossed the line. And that argument never really ended. Because Patty Hearst stopped being just a person in the public eye. She became a symbol of class, fear, media power, violence, trauma, and public judgment. Depending on who was talking, she was the fallen heiress, the brainwashed captive, the willing radical, the tragic survivor, or the criminal who had to answer for what she did. And the story kept escalating. The SLA became one of the most notorious groups in the country. There were shootouts, safe houses, manhunts. The whole thing unfolded like a national fever dream. In Los Angeles, a major confrontation with law enforcement ended in flames and death for several SLA members. But Patty was not there. She remained on the run with others, and the mystery only deepened. Then, after months and months of headlines, she was finally captured. And when she was brought in, the courtroom became America's next stage. Now the nation had to decide what it believed. Her defense argued that she had been kidnapped, terrorized, controlled, and psychologically coerced. They argued that whatever the public thought it saw in those photographs and recordings, it had no idea what fear and captivity had done to her mind. The prosecution argued that she had participated in crimes and had to be held accountable. And there it was. The question that made this case unforgettable: what is choice when someone has lived under terror? The jury convicted her. She was sentenced to prison. And still the debate did not stop, because even after the verdict, people kept wrestling with the same thing. Was justice being done? Or was a traumatized young woman being judged by people who wanted simple answers to a story that was never simple? She did not serve the full sentence. Her prison term was later commuted, and she was released. Years after that, she received a full presidential pardon. So legally, the final chapters of her story were not the same as the first ones. The country that once watched her as a scandal eventually watched the law soften its judgment. And Patty Hearst kept living. That may be the part people forget. She did not remain frozen in that one photograph forever, even though America never stopped replaying it. She married. She raised a family. She wrote about what happened to her. She tried, in her own way, to reclaim her story from the headlines, the prosecutors, the commentators, and the public arguments. But the image never left. That young woman with the rifle became one of the defining images of the 1970s, because it captured something bigger than one case. It captured a decade in crisis, a country confused about power, a media machine hungry for spectacle, a public desperate to sort people into neat categories: victim or villain, innocent or guilty, good girl or bad girl. And Patty Hearst's story refused all of it. That is why it still grips people, because it forces us to sit in discomfort. It forces us to ask how trauma changes a person. It forces us to ask how quickly the public turns a human being into a symbol. It forces us to ask whether survival can look like betrayal from the outside. It forces us to ask who gets to define someone after they have lived through the unthinkable. So when we tell the story of Patty Hearst to a 2026 audience, we are not just telling an old crime story. We are talking about media narratives. We are talking about public judgment. We are talking about coercion, fear, and identity. We are talking about what happens when one life is swallowed by politics, violence, and spectacle. Patty Hearst was a kidnapped heiress. She was a national obsession. She was a defendant. She was a symbol. She was a survivor. She was a woman the entire country argued over while she was still trying to survive the story herself. And nearly 50 years later, the question still hangs in the air, just as sharp as ever. Who was Patty Hearst, really? And who got to decide? Tishais has be ian shara pilas apra isent ion.